This is another iRaw podcast.
Welcome to Wildly Unplugged, sharing stories of nature, conservation, and creativity. Discover what develops when you unplug and step outdoors. Jason, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Greetings from down under.
So you started your career off as a zookeeper at Royal Melbourne Zoo. What was that experience like? And then why did you decide to transition to photography?
Well, I actually started photographing when I was 8 using my mum's little compact camera. And then during high school, I just fell in love with the medium. I always drew and painted back in the day, but not your wonderful work, which I can see in the background, but mine was surrealism and things like that. And when I finished high school, I studied the sciences and art all the way through. So I was fortunate enough to be offered a position as a zookeeper when I turned 18. So I finished high school and all of my tertiary degrees were done whilst I was at the zoo. And ironically, in my first high school excursion, I was left behind by my class at the zoo. So they left the zoo. I was still at the zoo. And then 6 years later, I walked through the gates as a zookeeper. So zookeeping is quite a surreal pastime. It's you spend your time with non-human species more than you do with our own species.
What animals in particular did you work with?
I specialized in carnivores and primates predominantly. So big cats, I was the big cat keeper for many years, but lots of small carnivores, bears, things like that. And then when I transitioned to primates, it was gorillas, orangutans, all the arboreal primates, the tree dwellers and things like that. But throughout my 12 years as a zookeeper, I pretty much worked with every species, and I had dozens of tanks of snakes and frogs and everything at home. And it's quite an obsessive, all-encompassing career, really, being a zookeeper. It's not your usual career, that's for sure.
I relate with you in a few different things. When I was younger, I got left behind at our science center during a field trip. I got lost and they left me. And then I worked in an aquarium. So I find that diving with sharks in an aquarium setting, I really got used to some of these bigger predators. Do you find that your experience as a zookeeper and that kind of one-on-one up close helped you when you're out in the field?
Very much. That's a great question. For me, Australia's famed for its snakes and spiders and all of those sorts of things. So where my parents bought their first home, they were only the second house. So there was lots of wetlands and everything. The burbs hadn't reached there. So my father was a long-haul truck driver. He was always finding on the road animals that had been injured, owls and snakes and reptiles and tortoises and things like that. So I grew up in a halfway house for wildlife anyway. We had kangaroos, we had all of these things. So by the time I went to the zoo, being around wildlife was normal for me. And then my studies were in the animal sciences and working with wildlife every day. So that when I started traveling and working in remote locations, that was really all I'd ever known, was working with wildlife. And I actually, for many years, refused to take a picture of a person. I'd go away for months and I'd come back with no people pictures, and it would drive editors insane. But you learn to do that. It takes time, though.
Yeah. I was looking through your book, Icebergs and Iguanas. There's a picture of a little girl under an umbrella. How do you set up a shot like that? Is that just something and you are just able to capture it in the moment?
Yeah, most of the shots that I tend not to stage shots. That particular frame, I was sitting on the shores of an Andean lake, so in the Andes in South America, and there was an active volcano to the left, and the sun was going down behind it. Can you hear that sound?
Uh-uh.
Oh, okay. We've got 10 puppies here. So if anyone hears any strange sounds, it's the puppies, and one of them's having a very intense dream at the moment. So it's all very cute and chaos. But so I'm sitting there, and that young girl walked out of the darkness, literally walked up to me, sat down in front of me. I had the camera in my hand. I lifted the camera, took the shot. She didn't say a word, thought I was boring, stood up and walked back into the darkness again. And that's the frame. Knowing what to do if that moment happens is, I guess, what differentiates professionals, and I'm touching wood here, from amateurs, is that in those moments, you know how to set the camera up or read the light or the settings that you need. But yeah, she came in for a matter of, she was there for less than a minute and walked away. But whenever I do those shots, whether it's wildlife or people, you really need to know your gear well, and you need to be prepared to to capture that story or see the story and then translate it through the image.
Fantastic. Like when I was little, my room was lined with National Geographic images, like cutouts, and just pasted all over my wall. And like just, I spent my childhood dreaming about doing what you do. What was it like the moment that you found out you were going to be working for National Geographic? Because that's obviously a really big name.
Yeah, it's a really big name. It was interesting because I was one of those people that, and I guess for those people who might think that once you've been in the game a long time, you become completely comfortable with the role or the title or who you are. And that's not necessarily the case. Some people are like that, but I'm not. And I shot for many magazines and publishers before I actually contacted National Geographic. And I rang them, I cold called them and said, can I speak to someone at the magazine who focuses on wildlife? And the lady who answered the phone was the director of photography for Natural History. And her opening line was, Jason, we've been waiting for you to call.
Wow.
And I know that was the surreal moment because I'm on the other side of, and I was young. I was the youngest there. There's always the youngest. I was the youngest. So they had me submit a story proposal and then do some more shoots on that, which they broke up and put into the magazine. And when that came out, it was the same weekend that I got married. So I got married to Geographic and to Megan, my wife, on the same weekend. But it was then they invited me to Washington and to bring a whole series of frames that I thought told my career at that point. And I presented them 44 times to different directors and publishers and everything at National Geographic, all different departments. And during that 10 days, 9 or 10 days, I was offered a contract of representation. So that was 2001, so a few years ago now. So I've been working with them since 2001. Which is a privilege. It's a privilege. They're amazing.
That is fantastic.
Mm.
So you had a lot of photographs from your experience and you had your behind the scenes tales from your field journals.
Mm.
So here at Wildly Unplugged, we totally advocate for journaling as much as possible, especially when you're out in nature. How happy were you to have those records to be able to then put that into a book?
Yeah, and it's fascinating, isn't it, journaling? Because people think that journaling is something from the 19th century or earlier, or whatever the case might be. But journaling for me was always something that gave me an outlet to detox positively or negatively. So when I started working in the field, my journals were tiny, or I just, even now, if I run out, I'll buy something in an airport, but I have them handmade in Philadelphia, actually. And they're beautiful pieces in themselves. But to be able to go back to those records and look at my thoughts on those moments. And I'm quite eidetic, so I remember all the frames I've ever taken. And then having those notes sometimes to go back to was really important, I think, in making the journey such a personal one in the book, because I wrote all the text and I needed it to have my voice, which a journal often has that no one gets to read. So the interesting thing for me, Lauren, was that I live in Melbourne, and Melbourne had the world's longest lockdown. It was brutal. We were inside for a couple of years, and then I had to wait an extra 6 months before I could go back on the road because Geographic were concerned that I'd be locked out of the country again because Australia had all these policies. So I had 2.5 years off the road. And what I have found is that it's been a journey back after that 2.5 years to create the way I want to create again. Like I've gone hard pushing the shutter. There's no two ways about it. Not just firing away for the sake of firing, really trying to feel like myself again, feel who I was. But one thing I will say is that a casualty of that has been that I suffered incredibly during the lockdown. It was not good for me. I was grateful that I was well and I was with my family, but creatively it was terrible. And so my journaling really has struggled since I was released. And that in some cases I can get some thoughts out. And then in other cases I can't. And I start a journal entry when I start an assignment, and then I'm not connected to it. So I stop writing. So I've got all these fragmented journal entries since I got back on the road. But the experiences have been amazing. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that well? It's that the journal was such a personal thing for me that I became that link, I guess, that link, as people would understand it, to a website or whatever, that link between my mind journaling and the creative part of pushing the shutter and making the images has been damaged and early on very much broken. So I'm looking forward. I go back to Antarctica on the weekend for the next month. And that is always a place where, due to the nature of the landscape and things like that, the days are long, the sun doesn't go down. But I'm really hoping when I find that peace that I often find down there, that I can actually do a full shoot of thoughts but maybe take the pressure off that I don't have to journal every day, which I normally do. I normally journal every day, but we'll see how it goes. I don't want to jinx myself, but I love journaling and I encourage everyone to journal. And you don't have to be sitting there writing prose that that passes the test of time. It's really a way of expressing yourself that often with nature gives you a moment's pause to actually think about the experience that you've had. Whereas you might find that with painting and illustrating, but I think with photography, it's such an instantaneous thing now that people don't often connect as deeply with what they're making as potentially they could be.
I hope you are able to connect the dots for yourself again in your journal. And I always tell the kids when we're out in the field, when they don't know what to journal, I'm like, whatever you feel like, if you want to make a map, if you want to write a song, it's whatever you want to do because it's for you and it has to make you happy. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it.
No, that's right. And for me, some of the stories in Icebergs to Iguanas, some of them, the premise for it was me thinking about stories that meant something to me personally. Because I've been on the road a long time. I've been on the road 30, 40 years. And I made a list without looking at pictures. And then we started selecting stories to start. So if things go to plan, this will be a trilogy and we'll journey around the world. But then some of those stories might have been going for 30 years. And you're going back through journals where you might not have been there for a couple of years, and suddenly you're there twice in a year. But and we're old enough, we're parents and things like that. You look at what you've written and then you go, wow, that sounds really bad. And that's the thing, isn't it? Because you see the world differently as you get older. And one of the important things is that, that when we're young, we don't set the boundaries that we set on ourselves when we're older. Who cares if the sky's painted purple or the sky's painted green? It doesn't matter. But when you're an adult, you say, oh, the sky should be blue. And the wonderful thing with journals is it sets you free to do it as you want to do it. And I'm like the journal's with me on every trip and I make attempts. But also too, I was so focused on finding that connection between myself and my craft again that I just think that there wasn't a lot of area left for a second form of craft whilst I've been on this journey coming back from the lockdown.
Definitely changed a lot of people. When you were reliving your experiences in your journal, was there anything that you had forgotten about?
Yeah, I think it's funny because there was a few things like even with the shipbreaking story, I was going back in a terribly difficult story about men dying and the ships getting broken up and all of these things. But also too, to my point before about how you sound, it was so hard to do that over a couple of years. And they didn't want me there. And when you're working in India, it's very difficult. Life's tough and the people are robbing you and doing whatever. And so you write some things in your journal where you go, that sounds really bad, because going, bloody Indians, they keep stealing or whatever the case might be. Where I've been there probably 20 times and I love the country. I've got many friends there. But in that moment, you get taken back to that frustration or to that illness or to that experience. And for me, as I said, it's a very personal journey. So there were things that I did come across where I went, wow, that's right. And sometimes many times they're not images connected with those thoughts and emotions. It doesn't have to be that. It's just that detox. And when the stories are tough, a journal is a great way to when you're crying over whiskey at night because you've seen something horrific, a journal is a great way when you can't call home and no one understands anyway because you're in such a place that they can't relate to, that a journal can be that other person that you share that emotion with. And there was a lot of things I laughed at, sitting there going, yeah, I've not really been that bright in my life. I've had so many diseases and rebuilds. And when you go back through the journals, you go, yeah, wow, I might have to smarten up at some point.
It makes for some great stories in a book.
Yeah, it's correct. It does. Yeah.
And so from your idea, like what sparked the idea for you to even start the book? And from that idea to publication, how long did that take?
Yeah, fantastic question. Geographic, my archives of my images in the Geographic archives are very large, just by the nature of how I shoot. So it's not that I go brrr and take a million pictures. I shoot less than most of the people there. But the way I tell stories is quite diverse. So when they do the edits, they take a lot of pictures that they might be able to use for the next 100 years. And every year I would go across to Washington, where we're based, and my editors would say, "Where's the book? Where's the monograph? Where's the this?" And this went on every year for probably about 10 years. And every time I would say, "Where's the money?" Because if I have any money, I'm going to put myself on a plane to capture more material, which you're then going to use to make the world a better place. So there was this juxtaposition. And then eventually a couple of friends turned around and said, "Look, just bite the bullet. You've got like the equal largest collection in the archives there, not necessarily in life, but in the archives, the equal largest. And there's so many stories, just bite the bullet." And so, not knowing that COVID was going to hit, I built a team. I said to Geographic, we changed company hands. So we got bought by Disney. We're part of the Disney family now. And so lots of things changed there. I didn't want to wait. They asked me to wait and the book division. And I said, "Look, I'm just going to move ahead. I'm excited now. Let's see what happens. You guys are transitioning, as they say in corporate world." And so I built a team of 8 people with people who had worked for Geographic before, other editors, designers, everything like that. And that next process, that probably took 2.5 to 3 years to work out what stories I wanted to do, get the designs the way we wanted them, and then go through those field journals, but also go back through the archives. But I did the heavy lifting then, Lauren. There's so many stories, I just pulled the material as I went through so that I didn't have to go back through hundreds of thousands or whatever number of frames again. And publishing's a journey in itself, because you learn that you can't have everything that you want in a book. Either the gutter in the middle's in the way, or the format doesn't lend itself to it. And that was one of those scenarios with the Serengeti story and the Antarctic story and the Amazon story. They will be books in their own right at some point, because they've been going for decades. And so I couldn't give everyone everything I wanted, because they're now a story amongst other stories. So for people who might be listening, no, it doesn't get any easier to cull your babies. It does not get any easier. If I've been in the Serengeti for 30 years and there's all these shots, I go, "Wow, people love that, people love that." But do they work in a smaller story format? Not necessarily. So that was learning to let go, was, I think, or trying to learn to let go, maybe is a better way of putting it, was part of that process that I'd not had to go through too many times before. Because when you work with editors, the editor is paid to know what to do when you have some input, but at the end of the day, an editor is making that decision. So it's one of those scenarios where, when I had control with the team, other people had to help me let go. So I'm just one of these.
Oh,
She's
stop it.
Yeah,
So
we've got 10 Groodle puppies, and our dog's a Groodle, and the father was a Border Collie show dog. So this one looks a bit border, but the others don't.
oh, so cute.
Yeah, she said she was crying at my feet. So yeah, so the process is something that I often encourage people to do in storytelling when they're doing storytelling, whether that's through any other medium, is try and think about how people who weren't with you might be able to join you on that journey. How can you take them with you on that journey, by visually or with your words or something like that? Because of course, not everyone gets to have the same experiences as everyone else does.
And I'm glad to hear that you've got plans for more books. I wanted to ask you why you think it's important for books like yours to exist, because everybody has a cell phone and there's images everywhere on Instagram, and you've got AI and everything. And you've
Yeah.
been doing this for so long. You've got an eye literally all over the world, and you've seen how it's changed, and even in just 20 years. Why do you think
Yeah.
that's important?
I think the tactile nature of books is really important, because, again, it does one of two things. It connects you in the moment because you're physically touching something. And we all look at screens all day long, whether it's processing pictures or sending emails or looking at Insta or whatever the case might be. Whereas when you're with a book, it becomes a partnership. You're there, you have to flip the pages. There's a reality that someone actually had to make this. And I bought a piece, just to digress. I was just in California for the book tour, excuse me. And I bought a glass piece that an artist did in California. And he had done this interpretive piece of anemones in the local rock pools near where he lived. And it was wonderful. It was just wonderful. But what sung to me often with that piece was that he has to go out there and snorkel or dive and learn about that reef and experience those anemones swimming past him. And that has to have moved him emotionally to want to create that. And so then he's gone back to his studio or his home or whatever, wherever he does his craft, and he's tried again and again and again to make that story in glass. And I think books are a lot like that. I think that there's that reality that, wow, someone actually put the time and effort in. And also, too, I think, I don't know about you, but oops, sorry, Sonny, I put it down on the ground, and ground was a little bit further than I thought. And I think digital's great, but for me, when we did the processing for the pictures, we wanted them to look like I captured. I'm very traditional. I don't do much post-production at all, like almost zero. Whereas everything online is so processed and everything like that. And it's like when an artist has if they do a painting or a drawing and they have it photographed so that it can be done, say, as a limited edition series or something like that and printed on beautiful paper. That artist wants their work to look like the original.
Yeah.
Because that's really important to the artist. They don't want it to look like it's on Instagram. Instagram's great. They don't want it to look like that. They actually want it to look like what they created. And I'm the same. So I think books, people are getting frustrated with the rapidity of life at the moment. So many people are going back to shooting film now and buying film cameras, and Kodak's manufacturing, Fuji Ilford, they're all doing it again because people who are creative, and I think most people are, they want to slow things down. They want to be in the moment. And thinking about publishing your own book, there's many companies that do it as well. Blurb and all the others do it. And it's a wonderful exercise to see how you've been creating. And I just encourage people all the time. You go on holidays, do a photo book. You want to do something with your family, the first 5 years of your child's life or whatever, do a photo book. Go through that process of the journey you've been on and then paste that together. And what's the order? What's the size of the images and all of those sorts of things? And for us, we had years of doing wall walks where we'd print out the pages and we put them on a big white wall and we'd see how they worked together, and we'd pull pages out and put different ones in. And then eventually we'd put them on a floor with a big ladder because it looked different looking down on it than it did looking at it, just to see that the story still worked. And if you've ever wanted to do a photo book, just Blurb. I've done them for the family before using Blurb, but there's many companies. But it's a great exercise and a lot of fun, but also shows you where your holes are in your process. That's the big thing. But don't do it thinking that everything's going to be perfect. You actually do it and sometimes go, wow, I missed up there. Or I need more of this or less of that or something like that. Yeah.
That's good advice. And you had brought up the guy that was snorkeling to get pictures, but you've also done some pretty crazy things to get some shots too, right?
Yeah.
And I think people forget that. They forget just what it takes to get some of these really epic shots.
Yeah, it's funny. I have this innate ability to heal well. So much that the surgeons have mapped some of my healing because I've had so many rebuilds, but I've had arms reattached and that my head flaps stitched back on several times and fingers cut off and broken bones and I can't discs punched out of my neck. And if you can think of a disease, bilharzia, brucellosis, malaria, swine flu, bird flu, MERS, I had MERS in the Middle East. That's the one that's 85% fatal. I've had that, gastros, stomach tears, all of this sort of stuff. And when you're in the field, because I have this no stop kind of policy in my brain, that I just keep going to my own detriment and patch it up, wait, get back, go to surgery or get stitches or whatever the case might be. But it's very different. Being a field photographer is very different to being on holiday. And a lot of people want this job. I read once that statistically speaking, the most sought after job on earth is Nat Geo photographer. And the second most sought after job in a Western country is zookeeper. So I've done them both.
Wow.
And the thing is too, is that people don't realize that we're paid to make pictures, not excuses. So it doesn't matter if it's -30 or it's pouring with rain or it's 110 or whatever the temperature is, or politically you can't get in. No one wants to know about that. Makes for great stories. What they want to know is that you're in the field. They don't care if there's food or if you're sick or anything like that. Just get it done. So if you're one of these people that likes to sleep in, it's not for you. If you like weekends, it's not for you. If you like going to bed, sometimes for me, sometimes I don't go to bed for days on end because I'll shoot daytime stuff. And then if I'm in the Amazon, all the insects wake up at night. So I'll just work right through the night. And then the daytime stuff wakes up again and I'll be hiking again. If you I miss my family and friends, of course, but if you're someone who's not good in their own company for long periods of time, it's probably not for you. I sat in a tree for 5.5 weeks by myself once, 20 hours a day. It was 0 overnight and 110 during the day. I took one picture in 5.5 weeks and I was covered in swarm ticks, covered in these plague ticks. So if I scratched myself, it was like having the mange, but I couldn't scratch myself because the animal was too timid. That sort of stuff breaks you. At the end, you get back, and it's amazing. It's a privilege to do what I do, and I love travel. But if you don't like dysentery, if you don't like diseases, if you don't like injuries, maybe it's not for you, or maybe you do it a different way, or something like that. Or I'm not saying you can't do it. I think everyone should try and do it. But all I'm trying to say is just alter your expectations. Yourself, what do I want out of this? Why do I want to do it? Don't do it for the fame and fortune because that's just never going to happen or happens for very few people. But if you want to make the world a better place and you want to have adventures and you want to have experiences and meet new cultures and learn about faith and religion and environmental things and all the wonderful opportunities that I have, then it could be for you. But it comes at a price. It definitely comes at a price and can be hard on relationships. I've lost numerous relationships in my life. Thankfully, my marriage is very solid, but we work hard at it. But I've lost a lot over the years to be able to do what I do. And people don't think that. They go, I'm on assignment, and they go away with their partner. And they call me up, go, oh, Jace, I'm going on assignment. What are your suggestions? And we're doing this and doing this. And invariably, it's like one of them's out of bed early to catch the morning light. And then they come back and sit by the pool for the rest of the day, have a few beers or something, and then maybe go out in the afternoon. And I go, yeah, that's just not going to work. You're not going to get the work done. And I hear it both ways, male to female. I've heard all the combinations and permutations, and they get upset. Oh, I know. Boy, do I know. I know because I've made all of those errors myself. It's a very big commitment to be in the field, especially regularly. And you need to make sure everyone's on the same page if you're going to do it.
So with all the physical discomfort, mental, emotional, social, how do you get comfortable being outside your comfort zone? Like what's going through your head to help you push through those times?
Yeah. For me, I think the more unstable something is, the better I function. Megan, my wife, would say he's amazing in a zombie apocalypse, terrible in everyday life. So, if I'm bouncing into countries I've never been to, I feel at home instantly, not through ego or anything like that, but that's just how I'm wired. So I'll have to go into I might land in a country and go into a really unstable city with a camera in hand, and I have to be like I've always lived there. Now, you can't fake that. People notice, they know. So for me, I think wherever I'm traveling, I'd like to feel like I'm at home, even if I've been there before or I've not been there before. But also, too, instinct is the big thing for me. I think humans have become very diverged from their own instinct. And that's what kept us alive. Is there a cave bear outside of the cave? And I've got the proverbial club.
Mm-hmm.
And now people walk across streets looking at their phones, not even thinking that a truck could be coming down on top of them or whatever. So for me, I'm very much aware of the space I'm in, whether I'm with wildlife or whether I'm with cultures, that whether the culture is welcoming, not welcoming, whether I've got to make those connections. And I'm very engaged with the people that I work with. So I can't expect them to share their lives with me if I don't share my life with them. For me, it's a default position, whereas I will come home and I live in a little heritage area in Melbourne, very close to the central business district, and it's lovely. But I could be sitting in the car for several kilometres to get to my office, and I'm like everyone else going, why don't you drive? the light's green, go. So I'm not as much as Buddhism's, I guess, my favorite faith. It's like I'm not always sitting there going, I try and do that. But I do that better when I'm in the field, even if it's a difficult situation than I do when I'm at home. So I try and bring that tranquility I often feel in the field. I try and bring that to home rather than home to the field, if that makes sense. So it works better for me bringing the field back home than the other way around.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad you said that too about like even when you're stuck in traffic, you still get frustrated and
Oh
that
yeah.
you feel that peace out in nature. That hustle and being around all that stress, it gets to everybody, no matter how centered we think we are sometimes.
And it's also too, sometimes I'll just find things that could be 50 cents or it could be more. I'll find sort of something on that'll go around my neck or something on my wrists or something like that. And I invariably, most of the time, remember where I got those things from. But all of them have a different emotional connect for me. So this is quite hippie-esque. But depending on the day, sometimes I might put something on that I do need that calming. And then other times, there'll be something on that just reminds me of a place. I don't wear something every day, but I definitely know that if it's a day off and I need to feel quite centered, there's a couple of pieces that I will wear because it takes me back to that place. It takes me back to that place.
What is your favorite place to remember?
My soul place is probably the Serengeti in Tanzania, the national park. And it sounds like a bit of a Lion King cliche, but I started working there when I was so young. And that's what changed the path of my life, just being in that park, which is the size of Belgium. And there's no fences, and it's wildebeest and lions and cheetah, all those kinds of things. But it was also one of those scenarios where at that point as a young man, and a lot of young men, obviously, there's that whole 15 to 25 period for men where our brains are developing and there's a lot of testosterone and we're not too sure which direction we're going to go. And I was fortunate. I made that decision as a teenager. I wanted to be a photographer, but when I was in the Serengeti, that really congealed that for me, that time works differently and in nature. That's the thing I've very much became aware of through my life, that you can't push it to happen. It just has to happen. And you can either get on that train or you can fight it, but you just can't fight it. So you must get on the train. It's very much my soul place. If possible, my ashes will be scattered there and maybe half there and half in my favorite surfing break. But I do love it there. And it reminds me in many ways of Australia, where we're such a vast continent. We're the same size as the contiguous US, but with 1/17 the population. So there's a lot of empty land in Australia, and I get that similar feeling there, except there's different wildlife, of course.
Very nice. Now, for someone who was interested in wildlife photography, what advice would you have for them to get started?
Yeah. So everything's a photo. That's the bottom line. If for me, I get paid to make imagery, to find imagery. That's my gift if I had one, and reading natural light. So my a couple of tips I would say is forget post-production. Just no one cares. Yes, they might love it on Instagram, but if you want your work to be picked up by an editor, they want to see the raw file. They want to see the original capture. So I barely know anything on Photoshop or Lightroom or anything. I've had staff over the years, but I'm interested in the actual capture. So that's the first stage. It doesn't matter if it's a flower in your garden or a leaf or a raindrop on a winter's day or a snowflake or light off a snowdrift because you're in winter at the moment and everything like that. There's always a frame to be had. So just stop yourself, just pause if you've got time. If it's a bird flying, it gets more difficult. But try and think about that frame. What is the story you want to tell? Lead people into the story, not out of the story. So you want your lines in the composition bringing people in. And then think to yourself, is my exposure right? Is it wrong? I judge competitions for people sometimes. And I was just recently a judge for the Travel Photographer of the Year, which is a big global event. And some of the raw files that we saw, the original captures were terrible, like terrible. The composition was okay, but everything else they'd had to manipulate the pictures to get them back. Now,
Hmm.
immediately that's going to get you disqualified from a good competition. You shouldn't be able to do that. So I think for beginners, just remember that every frame does make you better. It's a bit of a cliche, but at the back of the book, there's a thought process that I go through with every frame that I also used as my judging criteria for a scholarship I ran for Geographic for about 9 years. So in the back of the book, it says, is the picture doing this? Is it adding something to photography? Is it da, 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 da? Because I want my pictures to do the same. But the number one rule I think I have in photography or in art, or it doesn't matter, but since we're talking photography, there can only be one thing in your frame. So what is the one thing that made you want to take that picture? Now, that one thing is you, it's your connection to the frame. So, is it the reflection on the leaf, or is it the way the animal's turned, or the color of bird? If it's a bird at a winter feeder, for example, it doesn't mean that it's the whole bird. Think more analytically. Is it the red breast, or is it the shape of the bill, or is it how the snowflakes are forming around it? Find that one thing in every frame that you take, because there's always one thing. Yeah, sometimes the sky's beautiful at sunset. You go, I just love the sunset. Okay, fine. But even then, if you dive into that, there's probably one cloud that you love more than everything else. Put that one thing into your picture and then build the rest around it. So in my frames, there's always one thing that made me want to take that picture. And that's what I'd suggest as a good starting point.
So what is your absolute favorite photograph that you've ever taken?
Oh, wow. It's too early in the morning for a bottle of wine to have that thought. But look, probably there's so many. And the interesting thing in the book, so often the frames are the last frames on the last day or something that you get. People tell those stories, but it's so true. But there is a frame in the book, in the Serengeti story, and it's got a giraffe in amongst a wildebeest herd. And the sky behind the giraffe is ashen grey. And I'd been on the road for 3.5, at least 3 months, I think. And on that last day, not all of it in that park, but on that last day, wildebeest herd started crossing the river. Crocodiles were grabbing them. A lioness was standing next to me. She's running backwards and forwards, grabbing wildebeest as they come out of the river. It was all biblical. It was crazy. And then all of a sudden, out of the left, this giraffe, big male giraffe, just wanders into the herd because the herd realizes we don't want to cross anymore. There's crocodiles and lions there. And I only took one frame on the left and the one that with the giraffe on the right. And the giraffe, I think, it must have hit like a slight rise in the ground because giraffes are huge, but it's even more large. And so here's this giraffe against this ashen sky with all these wildebeest. And when I took that shot, that was one of those spiritual moments for me where I could hear the universe singing. It was so monumentally beautiful that every time I see that shot, and I took that photo in 1992, more than 30 years ago, and whenever I see that shot, it takes me right back there. And as much as I've got many beautiful frames in that national park since then, when I look at that was like the cement that changed, was that shoot I told you about that changed how I saw the world. Because after the sun went down, my friend who was assisting me, we had to race for the park gate. That was the last day of the shoot, and
Wow.
we had not allowed out in that park in the dark. And so basically, I went ching and just went wow. And it was filmed, so I didn't know I'd got it, but I felt like just the moment was so special. And then we just literally packed the gear into the car, then started bashing our way back across the plain to get out the gate before we got fined. And that was literally the last afternoon. And yeah, it still makes me smile, that frame. But yeah, there's many I love, but that one was such a pivotal point in my life. And I think that's one of those things, isn't it? That often changes in direction and everything in your life happen for a reason at a certain time, and you always remember them.
For sure. Do you
Mm.
have any images that you thought you caught a perfect capture and either you ran out of space on your card or your battery died or it just didn't catch on film?
Yeah, many. Yeah, we call them the ones that got away, the OTGAs,
Mhm.
the ones that got away. And yeah, there's many shots actually in the cupboard next to me. There's some memory cards from a shoot where something went wrong on the cards, and I've got to try and extract the files out of that card because there's shots in there of hippopotamus, and I can see the hippo in the background that potentially could be amongst the best hippo shots I've ever taken, but they're locked there somewhere in that card, and I need to get them back. But many moons ago, I shot a really rare hornbill, and I was on film, and my body just automatically knew that I was at 25, 26, 27, 28. And then I thought I must be close to the end of the roll. And it just kept going. And it turned out in my rush, I hadn't put film in the camera.
Oh no.
And yeah, so I haven't seen that bird ever since. Decades, I haven't seen that bird again. So yeah, there's always those moments. But I just did an edit on some Central Asian work that I did, the old Soviet countries. And but even though the pictures were there was a whole raft of frames where I just, I looked at them and went, yeah, I could have done better. And you should have that thought from time to time where I thought, okay, that really works, but what the hell was I thinking with that? What is going on? And there was quite a few of those. And it was interesting to do that exercise. And I think the god of photography needed to give me a kick in the backside, I think, for that shoot. I think there was a lot of great stuff, but I think I just had too much on my plate and too many roles, too many responsibilities. And I thought I was on my game, and I wasn't on my game as much as I believe I should be on my game. Everyone else loved the work, but you need to be hard on yourself, I think, to stay focused.
Yeah.
Especially after this many years. And that's the other thing too, Lauren, is that you never want to go away. You don't want to leave your kids. You don't want to leave your family or whatever. I love the travel and the adventure, but when I'm working, I'm in the field and I'm missing them, but I get it done. But you don't want to be away and then not maximizing those opportunities. You want to be out there working hard, getting it done, so that when you come home, you're not sitting there looking at the computer going, what was my head on a swivel? Why the hell is the horizon doing that? Or how did I miss that? Or something or other. You don't want to be in that scenario. It's not a good feeling.
Yeah. Jason, I could talk to you literally all day. I hope you come back when you publish your other books and tell us all
Yeah,
about where can people pick up icebergs and iguanas?
yep. It's now available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, potentially lots of bookstores around the US as well have it. But yeah, but all of the major online players, if America's so good at doing that, you can pick up icebergs to iguanas there. And then my socials, like I said, I'm on so many planes, I sometimes fall a bit behind. Everything's under Jason Edwards NG, the letters N and G for National Geographic. I'll bounce to Antarctica on the weekend and see what I get down there and try and, if I can get some bandwidth from the ice, I'll put some stuff up. Otherwise, I'll do it when I get back.
Very good. Looking forward to seeing that. And before we go, what is one tip you have for someone that would like to connect with nature?
Yeah. I think the most important thing for me connecting with nature is allowing myself to be in the moment. It sounds so obvious. And you might do a hike, you might do a walk, you might sit in the park and just be looking at the trees in your local park. But for me, when I'm doing that, it doesn't have to be exotic and awe-inspiring. I'm just trying to look for some detail to take my mind away. So I'll lie on my back and I'll watch leaves blowing in the wind or something and just really be in that moment and be grateful. I think that's one of the things as I get older, and I've always been a grateful kind of person, but for nature, I'm grateful for those opportunities. I'm grateful for that moment to say, wow, and maybe it's 3 minutes out of my day or something like that. I think it's hard to be in the moment because we're all so busy, but I think no matter what opportunity you have, give yourself, allow yourself to sit there and just say, wow, okay, I don't have to think about anything for 3 minutes. I can look at bark on a tree. I can listen to a babbling brook or, like I said, a reflection off a leaf. It doesn't really matter, but to allow yourself the freedom to be in the moment, I think it's a very Buddhist thing to do because time moves fast for most people, and I think that is one way to reconnect yourself with the world around you, and to give yourself permission to be grateful for that opportunity, especially when there's things that can be incredibly tough in life. People go through very difficult times in their lives, and then it's hard to be grateful for the simplest of things, but they're free and they don't cost you anything, and maybe that's something that just gives you a moment's pause or lifts the spirits, even if it's just for those few moments. And I know when I came out of lockdown and I went to Antarctica, that was the first assignment I had. And when I turned up with the team, they said, Jace, what do you want out of this? And I said, 6 frames and to see myself in the mirror. And that's all I want. And they just didn't even know where to go with that. And I said, I just haven't seen myself for 2.5 years. I've just been so broken that the reflection was not who I pictured myself to be. So I just want to watch the light. I just want to watch the light and just enjoy the sounds or the smells or whatever. But again, it doesn't have to be exotic like that. It can just be anywhere that gives you the freedom to have a few minutes for yourself and be grateful for that. I think is a great way to connect to nature. And then you value it more. That's the other thing as well. It creates value.
It was beautiful, beautiful, excellent advice. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thanks for having me, Lauren. I'll see you again.
Yes. Until next time, discover what develops when you unplug and step outdoors. Wildly Unplugged podcast is a production of Wild Development Studio. The views, opinions, and statements expressed by individuals during Wild Development Studio's productions do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Wild Development Studio or its affiliates. Participation in any activities, expeditions, or adventures discussed or promoted during our content may involve inherent risks. It is strongly advised that individuals conduct thorough research, seek professional guidance, and take all necessary precautions before engaging in such activities or venturing into wilderness areas. Wild Development Studio, its representatives, or employees shall not be held responsible for any injury, loss, damage, accident, or unforeseen incident that may occur as a result of participating in activities inspired by or discussed in our content. By choosing to engage with our content or act upon any information provided, individuals do so at their own risk and discretion.
For more great iRaw podcasts, visit irawpod.com. That's IROARPOD.com.